So Watson, you've decided not to invest in South African securities?
I don't know how you know that.
You sound really difficult. I observe the groove between your left forefinger and thumb.
Groove.
It is enough to tell me that you do not intend to invest your small capital in the goldfields.
As you know, connections. Groove.
And yet the train of thought is elementary. 1. You had chalk between your finger and thumb when you return from your club. 2. You put chalks there when you play billiards. 3. You will never play billiards except with Martin. 4. You told me about a month ago that Martin had an option on some South African property which he desired you to share with him. 5. The checkbook is locked in my drawer and you have not asked for the key. Number 6 is the logical conclusion. You do not intend to invest your small capital in South Africa's goldfields.
Huh. How absurdly simple.
I knew you'd say that.
Oh, I wonder who that is. Were you expecting a client?
No, Watson. But I hope it is one. My practice has been decidedly slack lately. Go and see who it is, will you?
Yes, of course. It's all right, Mrs. Hudson. I'll show the gentleman in. Right this way, sir. Good evening. I'm Dr. Watson.
My name is Shirley Stoner.
Oh, come along in, Mr. Stoner.
Thank you, and this must be the great Sherlock Holmes.
My name is Holmes. The adjective is your own, Mr. Stoner. Sit down, won't you?
Merci. I don't imagine you know anything about me, Mr. Holmes.
Nothing beyond the fact that you went to University of Paris and abroad to Oxford, that you have a beautiful and socially prominent wife, and that you contribute to the Sun magazine with some regularity.
Ha! I'm disappointed in not receiving one of your famous deductive analyses, Mr. Holmes. But I'm glad that my name is familiar to you.
You contribute to the Star magazine too, sir. It's a very interesting page turner. Perhaps you have read a few of my humble efforts?
Yes, indeed, Doctor. Very colorful stories they are.
Oh, thank you so much.
If you don't mind me saying so, Mr. Stoner, my own stories, which also deal with the world of crime, seem to be even more sensational than Watson's.
Because he has the facts to work with, and I have to work with imagination. But the reason I've come to you tonight, Mr. Holmes, has nothing to do with imagination. I find myself mixed up in a real-life murder that is even more puzzling than the things dealt with in fiction.
Murder, Mr. Stoner. I say, really, you...
The facts, s'il vous plaît.
Well, Mr. Holmes, I'll give it to you as briefly and concisely as possible. I just got back from Paris yesterday. My secretary went with me. He did not return. The French police say he committed suicide. I know that he didn't.
How do you know that, Mr. Stoner?
Boy had everything in the world to live for. No financial worries and a very promising future ahead of him.
Please describe the circumstances under which his body was found.
Well, I'd left him alone in his room. When I knocked, there was no answer to my knock. I tried to look through the keyhole of the door. I could see nothing because the key was on the inside. At last, I grew worried. A friend of mine, an inspector of the police, was dining with me that night. He suggested we should investigate. So we broke down the door. My secretary, he was dead. A bullet in his heart.
Inside a room locked from the inside. Obviously, the police were right in thinking it was a suicide, Mr. Stoner.
Of course, you examined the room thoroughly for traces of some other method of ingress.
Meticulously. The windows were locked tight.
No sliding panels.
None.
Where was the revolver?
Inside his right hand, one bullet gone.
And you said the key was on the inside of the door.
And that's why the police wrote it off as suicide. Mr. Holmes, how would you explain such a situation?
I'd like a few more facts before giving an opinion. You say you examined the room meticulously. Was there no oddity, nothing out of place, nothing peculiar in that room?
Things that I noticed.
Perhaps a pellet of wax?
Yes, I did find a wax pellet. It was lying on the carpet near the door, and I couldn't imagine what it was doing there.
Well, that's your answer. Now, one more question. This English inspector who entered the room with you, what was his personal relationship with your secretary?
They'd quarreled the night before about some girl at the Folie Bergère.
Since there you have it, Mr. Stoner. The murderer left the room, locked the door from the outside, removed the key, and plugged the keyhole with wax. When the room was broken into, he simply slipped the key into the inside of the lock, thereby dislodging the wax pellet. Obviously, from what you've told me, only the inspector had that opportunity.
The English police inspector, a murderer? Holmes, what are you going to do about this?
Nothing.
What?
Beyond wishing Mr. Stoner good luck with the editor of the Sun magazine.
I don't think I follow you, Mr. Holmes.
Oh, come now, Mr. Stoner. It's an intellectual game and, in its way, quite stimulating. But don't think you can hoodwink me so easily.
Holmes, what are you talking about?
My dear Watson, I read the papers carefully.
What do the papers have to do with this?
I've noticed the presence of you and your lovely wife at so many social functions here in Paris in the past few days that I'm afraid I can't possibly accept your London story. The obvious answer remains. You've come to me with an imaginary problem in order to solve a difficulty in one of your stories.
Mr. Holmes, you're even smarter than I gave you credit for.
But this is so disgraceful, sir. Wasting my friend's time like this?
Well, I suppose I should apologize, Mr. Holmes. But here's the way that it happened. I came home last night a little under the weather. I had the most wonderful idea for a story. I was going to call it The Locked Room. I am convinced I jotted down some notes about it last night. When I awoke this morning, I could not find them. So I came to you for a solution.
I see. It's an excellent idea for a story, though I've known similar locked room problems. In fact, I don't recall that fiction has exploited the possibility as of yet.
Holmes, why are you being so calm? I think it's outrageous to come here and pick your brains for a story.
My dear Watson, how else do you get the ideas for your own masterpieces? Should you grudge it to him?
I must say you're being very sporting about it, Mr. Holmes.
Oh no, Mr. Stoner. I'm being businesslike. May I ask, how much are you in the habit of receiving for a story of yours in the Strand magazine?
20 guineas. Why?
I am a consulting detective, and I think I've given you a valuable opinion. My fee, if you sell your story, will be 10 guineas. Good night to you, Mr. Stoner.
Ah, there you are, Senor Stoner. A remarkable deduction, Andre. Yes, here I am. I spent all afternoon searching for those notes on your story. I could not find any trace of them. And yet, I could swear I did some work on it last night. You are sure I didn't give you some dictation? Oh, quite, Senor Stoner. If you'll pardon my saying so, you were un poco... Yes, go on, Andre. A secretary has some rights. I was drunk. That's what you meant, isn't it? I meant no offense. It'd be rather a relief if you did. You're always so infernally polite. Where's my wife? She's in the library with your brother-in-law, Senor Seal. Very well, Andre. I'll need you after dinner. I'm going to work on the story tonight. Yes, Senor Stoner.
Hello, Chad. I was beginning to worry about you not being back for dinner.
I stopped at the club.
Good evening, Chad.
Bonjour, Henry. And how is our master of violin this evening?
Chad, don't make fun of my brother like that. Yes, Chad. Go easy. I can't learn the violin in 2 easy lessons, you know.
I don't doubt that you're improving. You couldn't become worse.
Chad, you're intolerable. Henry's our guest.
And an unwanted guest as far as I'm concerned. He's been here 2 months. Why doesn't he try to get himself a job instead of mooning around here all day scraping away at his fiddle?
That's the last time you've insulted me, Chad. I'm leaving here in the morning.
I hope I can count on it.
How dare you, Chad? How dare you? If Henry goes in the morning, I shall go with him.
Now, Violet, just take it easy.
You've been drinking again, and you're disgusting when you drink. You've been absolute fool of yourself in front of Andre last night.
You're very protective about him. Are you sure those kind eyes he keeps making at you are entirely unreciprocated?
I hate you, Chad. I'm not waiting until the morning. I'm leaving tonight.
No, wait a minute, Violet. I'm sorry. I don't know what makes me do it. I get a few drinks and I just feel that I've got to hurt you.
Well, you certainly succeeded. I used to think it was a so-called artistic temperament that made you this way. Now, I realize it's the drink.
I'm sorry, Violet, but it's not been too easy for me. Having Henry around all day gets pretty trying, especially when I'm trying to work.
But he's planning on moving soon anyway. Surely you can tolerate him a little longer. For our sake, Chad. Can't you?
Of course I can, Violet. I'm sorry, dear. I'll try to be a little less boorish and I'll watch the drinking.
That sounds more like the man I married. Oh, and I'll help too. I'll try to keep Henry out of your way as much as possible, dear.
We can make a go of it, Violet. I know we can. Well, I'm going into my study. I want to jot down some notes on this new story while they're still fresh in my mind.
All right, dear. Dinner will be ready in half an hour. I'll call you.
Fine. A locked room. Yes, that'll be a good title for it. It would be worth giving Sherlock Holmes about 10 guineas for that. Who is it? Is that you?
I'm flattered that you've dropped by to see me, Inspector Lestrade. Not a business visit, I gather?
Bless you, no, Mr. Holmes.
You will have a whiskey and soda, won't you, Lestrade?
Merci kindly, Dr. Wasson. Not too much soda, if you don't mind.
The, Paris criminal has been a dull dog these days, Lestrade. My practice has been remarkably slow in the past few weeks.
Yes, same thing with us at the yard, Mr. Holmes. But of course, we don't grumble at that. Now take me. I've had an easy day today. Just come home from investigating a suicide in Church Street.
Indeed, another poor devil who couldn't stand the pace of our modern living, I suppose.
I suppose so, Doctor. Though, You'd have thought this man had everything he wanted. He was quite a successful writer, as they tell me.
A writer? What was his name?
He'd worked for the Strong magazine. Name was Chadley Stoner.
Watson?
You dropped that glass.
Did you say Charlie Stoner committed suicide tonight?
That's right, Mr. Holmes. You know him?
Under what circumstances was he found?
It was a routine case, sir. Locked the door from the inside and then blew his brains out. There were no secret panels or any of that stuff, and the windows were locked tight. It was suicide, all right.
The arm of coincidence is long indeed, but not as long as that. Has the body been moved?
No, Mr. Holmes. I told them to touch nothing until the police photographers arrived. Just to be on the safe side. You understand, sir?
Splendid. You have your coat and hat, Watson.
Right you are, Holmes.
But what's all the excitement, Mr. Holmes? It's just a suicide.
Nonsense, Inspector. I'll stake my whole reputation that Charlie Stoner has been the victim of a murder plot as cunning and diabolical as any I have ever heard. It's not hard to find a motive. Beautiful wife. Was this for his brother, who had been told to get out? An attractive and inventive young Spanish secretary who hated the dead man's cruelty.
And I called it just a routine suicide.
You will notice that there's no wax skeleton evidence this time. I'd say the answer is obvious. The dead man did write some notes on his story last night. The killer found them and realized he had been presented with the perfect murder method, never expecting that the dead man would divulge his method to me.
Mr. Holmes, why are you examining the keyhole of the door?
I was looking for a pellet of wax, Inspector. It's missing. Obviously, the murderer had read about that in the dead man's notes and was clever enough to remove it. But, let's examine the corpse. Interesting. Most interesting.
What? Holmes?
Surely you can see for yourself, Watson. The bloodstains clearly indicate that the man fell here, some 5 or 6 feet from the desk. And yet, with a dying burst of energy, he crawled towards the desk and clutched it. Undoubtedly, he was trying to give us a dying message.
But how can holding onto a desk give us a message, Mr. Holmes? And why should a dying man try to do that anyway?
Remember that the dead man was a writer and a student of criminology. In his last few moments of consciousness, he probably realized I'd be on the track of his murderer.
Yes, more than one clue, Holmes. Look at his body. As he fell for the last time, he upset that bowl of violets. And his wife's name was Violet.
Coincidence, I think, Watson. The flowers were knocked over inadvertently as he fell, but the move to the desk was a deliberate and desperate effort.
Well, if you talk about that, look here, gentlemen. Lying by his right arm, look. That was knocked off the desk too.
It's a seal with a monogram on it.
Right, Doctor. And Seal is the name of the dead man's brother-in-law, Henry Seal.
Interesting, but I refuse to believe that the dying man could deliberately knock over such a comprehensive number of incriminating objects as he died.
Then who do you suppose did do it, Holmes?
At this stage of the case, I shall suppose nothing, Watson. We have 3 obvious suspects waiting for us. Let's question them.
I don't know why they want us here. I know nothing about...
Quiet, please. Mr. Holmes wants to ask you some questions.
No, Inspector. I only wish to ask them one question. You, Mrs. Donnell, how did you occupy your time while you were waiting for the police to arrive?
I was so nervous. To try to calm myself, I did some knitting. I do quite a lot of knitting for the postcard line. You know?
I see. And you, Miss Darcille? What were your movements before the police arrived?
I sat in the library, Mr. Holmes, playing solitaire.
And you, Andre?
I went to my room and worked on my account books. I realized that my job here was finished.
I see. That's all for now. Thank you.
Come along, Henry.
Lestat,
Yes, Mr. Holmes.
I'd like you to get me those 3 objects spoken of. The knitting, the cards, and the account books.
Right you are, Mr. Holmes.
I don't see that you found out much there, Holmes.
Don't you, Watson? I'd have thought my line of reasoning was obvious.
What are you doing, kneading in that keyhole? You said that this time the wax pellet had been removed.
True, Watson. But even though the pellet's been removed, I'm sure there are still traces of wax inside the keyhole. And there are. Splendid. I will remove the lock and take it back to Baker Street. The murderer undoubtedly still had traces of wax on his fingers. A close examination of the fragments of wax on this keyhole, and an equally close examination of the knitting, the cards, and the account books shall be able to give us a solution to this case.
Well, Holmes, you've been poring over the microscope for nearly an hour. Have you got the answer?
Nearly, but not quite.
But you've examined all 3 of the objects. Surely it's just a question of finding which of them shows traces of wax.
Oh no, Watson.
Huh?
It's not as easy as that. Oddly enough, the knitting, the pack of cards, and the account books all show traces of wax.
That means that all of those people were involved in the murder. It was a concerted plan between the 3 of them.
I think not, Watson.
What?
And in 5 more minutes, I'm sure I can prove to you who the murderer is.
Violet. Violet. Why are you sitting alone here in the library?
Oh, hello, Andre. I'm so upset. They think Judd was murdered. The inspector is still questioning Henry. I believe they think he did it. Oh, it's awful. Oh.
Oh, now, don't worry, darling. Everything is going to be all right.
Please, Andre, with Judd's body hardly cold.
Oh, but surely, now that he is dead, you always made me believe that, well, if he were dead, that we could be together, darling.
I thought he was neglecting me. That perhaps there was some other woman. But just before he died, we had a talk. I knew it was going to be all right again.
But me, you were making a fool of me.
I was making a fool of myself. Please, Andre, forget it.
Forget it? No, my cold-blooded woman. I have risked my life for your happiness. I am not just some stupid boy you can play with. You cannot just throw me aside.
Please don't. Andre, you murdered Judd?
Of course I did it. I hated him. And I hated the way he made you unhappy. And the fool gave me the perfect way to do it by telling me about this filthy story and then forgetting he had done so.
You devil, get away from me. I'm turning you over to the police.
No, you are not. You are going to join Chad, since you loved him so much.
Andre, put away that revolver.
Ah!
That's fine, Mrs. Stoner. Are you alright?
Yes, but thank heavens you were both behind those curtains.
Nothing. Send for your policeman and have me taken to prison.
Midnight. It would be good to get back to Baker Street. It's been an exhausting evening's work.
Oui, Watson. A sorted case. Shabby patchwork of discontent and hatred. Well, we've been instrumenting and sending yet another felon to his rightful destiny.
You know, Holmes, there are one or two points I don't quite understand.
I can't believe it, Watson. What are they?
Well, you said that all three objects contain traces of wax.
They did, and at first that confused me. But there are various qualities of wax. For instance, Mrs. Stoner was knitting with a certain waxed wool, designed specifically in knitting for seafaring men. It gives the garment a weather-proof finish.
Never heard of it.
Possibly not, but it is a fact. And as you know, I specialize in such odd pieces of information.
What about the traces of wax on the cards Henry Seal used when he was playing solitaire?
Again, I was misled. Until I remember that Mrs. Stoner had told us that her brother had been playing the violin a short while before her husband's death.
Oh, he'd been using rosin.
Precisely.
Ah, yes.
Logically, it had to be the secretary. But the proof came when I made the final analysis of the 3 specimens of wax. Now that, on the account books, was the only one that exactly matched the traces of wax I found in the keyhole.
I suppose I am very stupid.
Now, anything else bothering you?
Yeah. At one point, you said that the dying man tried to indicate his murderer by clasping the desk as he died.
Yes, I'm sure he was trying to give us a dying message.
I was fooled by the violets and the seal.
That was a freakish coincidence, but the effort in crawling to the desk was not. That was the true message.
Well, I still don't see it.
Well, come now, Watson. This is Paris. Although the secretary wasn't a Frenchman, the French word for desk and for secretary is the same. Secrétaire.
Oh, I see it now.
Oh, really, Watson?
You will never get your fee for this case.
Indeed. And why?
Stoner's dead. He'll never sell that story to the Star magazine now.
True, Watson. But I have no doubt that you will. Although perhaps you'll have a slightly different version of it, and you'll probably call it something very melodramatic. Perhaps murder in the locked room.